Welcome to the International Mentoring Community, all things a mentoring lounge, where we have conversations. Sometimes it could get into a little bit of a debate, certainly discussions around those topics linked to mentorship, mentoring, mentor, mentee, and anything that has a ripple effect from that. I am Stephen Hobbs. I am a co-founder of the International Mentoring Community. Joining me is Doug Lawrence. We'll introduce ourselves a little bit more, but what I want to do is to share with you where we're going today with the topic of mentoring and leading, this notion of noise and news. And you'll know news is spelt with two S's. So there's something up. So what we're going to do is we'll go through a definition of mentoring that we use at IMC, which is something we do with every broadcast. And then we're going to just define a couple of terms like lead and manage, just to set it up to go with mentor. And we want to just go over what this news and noise means when we're connecting mentoring and leading together. And to be able to emphasize this connection, I have two stories to share. Doug has two stories to share. These are coming from our lived experience so that we can bring a little bit more of the seasoning into that vegetarian stew that is on the stove top at this point in time. For those who want to add meat, go for it. Then the other thing is we're just going to take a look at this notion of mentoring and leading through three key terms that we use to be able to round out the conversation. There's this notion of the connection between them, what might be a competition between them, and how do they collaborate together. This is one of the formats that we use in the International Mentoring Community to get in there and take a look at it and give you different perspectives, different considerations that you can take from this broadcast and add to your concepts, and certainly to improve focus and strengthen your practice as a mentor. So I think that gives a pretty good overview of where we're going in today's broadcast, Doug. So I think what would be helpful is, why don't you introduce yourself? I'll do the same, and then we'll go over the definition.
Okay, so I'm Doug Lawrence, and I'm co-founder of the International Mentoring Community. The role that I play is Director of Practice and Outreach, and I also have my own company, Talent C, that is focused, it's completely focused on mentoring and all things mentoring.
Great. And Stephen Hobbs, the other co-founder. I have my own company, Wealth Movement, WELLTH. Deal with olders going to elders who become mentors. That's the connection. I am the Director of Education Certification. So in many ways, you enter in having conversations with Doug, you meet me, and I make sure that you get through the process of what the education you need and the certification. And that's how Doug and I work together. I just want to celebrate Doug is very much deep practice. As he mentioned, his business is very much about mentoring. I don't have quite as deep a practice going on now. My lived experience has been around a lot of mentoring, but I'm very much in the support. I wouldn't say completely like in the background, because there's a lot of things in the foreground that I'm doing at the moment, but I make sure the library is up to date, the blog, these kind of things, just to make sure that we're offering whatever services we can in support of you. There will be some new workshops, so weekend workshops, a course coming up in the new year, so we'll certainly be sharing more about those as we bring to light this whole story, this all things mentoring story that we want to bring forward. So Doug, do you want to just go over the definition of mentoring that we use?
I sure can. So mentoring is a two-way trusted relationship where the mentor and mentee learn and grow together through personal and professional development. And if I were to grab out of that statement a couple things, or even just one thing, is the aspect of the personal and professional development, so that it's not just career development or stuff along the lines of your professional part of your life, but it's also looking at it from the personal aspect. And that becomes extremely important when we talk about the mental health, mental well-being of individuals that we're working with through the mentoring process.
Great. And for those of you who are listening in on the live broadcast, there is the chat functionality on Facebook and YouTube. You can certainly ask your questions. I am making sure that I monitor that as well. Look forward to any comments you want to share. And if you're listening to this after the live broadcast, again, in the comments section, you can add your thoughts. If you have questions, Doug and I, we monitor them as well, and we attempt to get back to you the best we can. So with that, we have that definition of mentoring, a mentor. The mentor, sometimes we have to understand, is the person, but it's also the action verb, to mentor. That's there. Because we're linking this mentoring story to leading, I think it would be helpful just to take a look at the words lead and manage, because lead and manage for me are like two sides of a coin, two ends of a stick. If you're going to have a coin, you look at one side, it's lead, the other side is manage. That's why you have two sides to a coin. You have two ends of a stick, because when you pick up one end of the stick, which is to lead, you actually pick up the other end of the stick, which is to manage, vice versa. So you can't really separate the two of them. And there are many connections between lead and mentor that we'll go over as well. But taking a look at the word lead from a verb perspective, it's to cause someone to go with you, to ensure someone uptakes the practices. So a lot of times when we think about lead, it's to get to a particular place, to use a particular practice. And for me, it's the sense of thriving. If you're leading a person, there's a sense of thriving. You are improving, focusing, and strengthening that person. They've picked up the sense that they accept you in you being leading to lead. Sometimes they'll give you the term leader. It doesn't always come immediately. I often think of the term leader as more like a gift given to you when you're leading, so that someone can celebrate the fact that you are guiding them. You are giving them a sense of the direction that they can uptake. And therefore, there's an experience that you have that supports you when you lead. So I just wanted to bring that to the foreground so that we have a connection to it. Because I've given that definition, is there anything in there that you want to pick up or you want to add, Doug?
No.
Okay, so the flip side, remember the coin, the two ends of the stick is manage. I just want to go over that, even though today is more about mentoring and leading. But managing is there, and from a verb, it's to be in charge of or to administer something, and that something could be more what I would call the systems that you're working with for the persons. Often leading is touching the heart of the person, whereas managing might, in some senses, touch the head of the persons using the systems. So there is a slight variation there, and sometimes people use them interchangeably. In my interactions using managing and leading, to lead, to manage, I have this sense of manage is for persons, lead is for person, and that just helps me to, okay, there is a little bit of nuance that goes with that. So in some ways where I may have used the word thriving with lead, there's an element of surviving with managing. Right? You're managing the systems to survive, to take care of things, keep things going. But to really get the most out of it is when you want to really get into the thriving, and that's when you lean into to lead, to, in essence, become a leader. Thoughts about any of the managing lead as we bring them both together, Doug?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. No, I'm
okay.
Good. Yeah.
All righty. Well, here is a connection. it's 3 words, and they're in a trinity. So 3 words in 3 combinations. So let's use it from this perspective. If you lead, then there's leading and leadership. So to lead is the verb, leading is the process of doing that, and leadership is the sense of the outcome. If you know how to lead and are doing the leading, there's leadership. There's a domain, the discipline that goes with that. The great thing is you can do the same thing: manage, managing, and management. Guess what? Mentor, mentoring, mentorship. There is a similarity here. So when we start to have a conversation about mentor, then there could be leader, there could be manager. So there is some really interesting, just even from a word perspective, what each of those words mean and put into action. There is some similarity there. Now, the great thing is, from a mentoring and leading perspective, what is the full connection that we want to bring out today? And that's what we want to explore on this broadcast. And the reason that we're doing it is that we get questions that come in, or when we go out and do some research. Doug is really great going to Quora. Do you want to explain what Quora is? Maybe some people don't know that.
Sure. So Quora is a website that you can actually go on the website itself and search for various topics, and you'll find there'll be all kinds of responses in that from a number of different people. And I'm one of those individuals that kind of monitors the Quora site and goes in, and where I see questions being posed or situations being posed, I will sometimes comment on those and provide some insight in that into it. But it covers a vast array of different topics. And I just noticed that, I think it was last couple of days, that in Quora that they've identified that I have 100,000 views of the comments and stuff that I've made. We've now reached 100,000 if they take it right from when we first started to where we are today. So that's pretty good, I think.
Yeah, I think you're doing pretty good. So again, asking questions about mentoring, mentorship, and you want to go to Quora to do it, you can poke around in there, but ask a question. I bet you Doug's going to be the one who answers it. So that's great. So it wasn't necessarily that Quora is where this question of what's the connection between mentoring and leading, which led us into this video today. It actually came from some conversations with people that we interact with, and some of them are considering to do the certification process through the international mentoring community. Some people, hey, I just got a question. I know you guys are pretty good. So this one actually rooted it itself through me, brought it to Doug. Doug and I said, okay, let's do a broadcast on the connection between the two of these. So I just wanted to give you that background, and that background of connecting, okay, defining those terms, and then bringing out the idea of the mentor, mentoring, mentorship linked to manage and lead. So again, you can listen to them again in the show more notes. That's sort of spelt out a little bit more so that you can understand them. But I think before we get into some of the stories to bring mentoring and leading together, I just want to go to this notion of noise and news. And this is built on the seedbed from which this grows is a continuum that we sometimes, or probably I wouldn't even use sometimes, probably every day, there is situations where these 5 words form this continuum. And those words are from uncertainty into ambiguity, to confusion or bewilderment, into risk, into certainty. So again, you could look at this as 2 ends of a stick: uncertainty, certainty. And there's something that's happening in between. And I bring it out is because there is noise associated with that uncertainty to ambiguity, and a little bit into the confusion. So that right end of that stick. And what there is there's the news, which leans into, well, the confusion to risk to certainty, the left end of the stick. So I wanted to bring that out. So if you find yourself in that uncertainty, oh, what's going on? There's probably a lot of noise that's around you at this point in time. Some of it can be deafening, disheartening, discouraging. There's words like that we might have that bring it out. But sometimes people go, I'm just a little more confused about what's going on. It seems to be really noisy out there. I think we hear that phrasing sometimes. The news side of this is the news was meant to bring from the cardinal directions of northeast, west, and south ideas to be able to help us in the living of our lives. Now, unfortunately, news, a lot of people look at it in different ways now, but that's how it was meant to be taken a look at. And the extra S was, if that news comes in, let it come from a safety point of view, so that what we can do is that we can manage the safe systems and lead safer practices. I think you can see the link back to what we just spoke about. And that is, that gives you a sense of the certainty, where you take risks, to what level of risk, and it gets you out of the confusion into, oh, okay, I see what's going on. Another way to look at it, and we've spoken about this before, is this idea of avoidance is a little bit more about the uncertainty and ambiguity. So I might go into avoidance versus the approach where I'm going to use risk and certainty to be able to move me forward. So I just wanted to bring it out why we've got new noise and news in there, because when you're mentoring and leading, you've got to understand the noise. What is it? But you then got to present the news to be able to help the person. But if you keep coming from the news only and not dealing with the noise sometimes, you may not have the stick, right? Again, think about it. Noise is one end, news is the other. It's a stick. You pick up one end, you pick up the other. So if you're going to try and figure out the news to help you with your mentoring and to help you with your leading, you're going to have to understand what's the noise that's present there as well. And that's why, because we're talking about leading and mentoring, it's often associated with a person. Versus the managing, you could use words like facilitating, instructing, which is deal with persons, the system versus the practice of the person. Now, these are nuances. I appreciate that, and that's why sometimes someone just says, and Doug, we've heard it so many, it's all the same thing. Let's just get on with it, right? Coaching and mentoring, the same thing. Managing, leading, the same thing. Don't worry about nuancing it. I'm one, Doug's another. We go, no, hang on a minute. Let's just take a look at what's going on here, because maybe there are ways to truly improve, focus, and strengthen. In this case, from an international mentoring community point of view, is to support the community with its mentoring in terms of how we mentor, why we mentor, and who's involved in mentoring and doing it on an international basis. That's why we have this nuance. That's why we do a lot of these mentoring lounge calls, and to be able to, a term we do is unpack them, unfold it, so that what we can do is have a deeper and richer understanding of mentoring. I think that's a fair way of looking at noise and news and putting it together with IMC, isn't it, Doug?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So that takes us into, well, what might be some stories that we connect mentoring and leading, so that what we can offer you from our lived experience, Doug and myself, and maybe yourself, who will add things into the chat function, right, now or later, observations or even comments and questions. But I think it would be important for us to share with you. And there are some sort of notes, prompts that are in the show more notes. So when you listen, you can pick up and look at the show more notes or the comments section. Show more on YouTube, comments on Facebook, and be able to undo it. So, Doug, I'm going to ask you to share a connection between mentoring and leading. And I think it's a manufacturing example that will get you to take a look at first.
Okay, so to sort of set the stage, I was brought into an organization, a manufacturing organization, to provide some mentoring of a new, I call them a baby manager, somebody that they had promoted into a manager position, and they wanted to set that person up to be successful. And they felt that having me work with them and to be able to mentor them, that this was going to be what exactly they were looking for. And so two things to think about with that particular example is, number one, I myself as the mentor have to demonstrate leadership skills in order for, it's like a role model perspective. So I have to role model what my expectation of that new manager is going to be. That's the first thing. And then the second part of that is that I also have to be able to monitor his growth and make sure that the skills that I have passed on to him, which are mentoring in context, that he's actually using those in the right fashion, in the right manner. Because I actually worked with a second individual in that organization where there were issues that we struggled to get beyond, that we weren't able to put corrective measures, changes in behavior. And part of that was because that what was needed was more handholding, more on-site, more regularly scheduled conversations in order to be able to help that individual work through those issues. But in both particular cases, there was mentoring techniques that were used. And at the same time, we also were monitoring, and I, as the mentor, was still demonstrating leadership skills through that mentoring process.
So in some ways, you were leading through mentoring and you were mentoring through leading.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me share one, then I'll come back to Doug. He'll share one, then I'll share one. So we wanted to give you 4 different ways in which to look at that. The one that I wanted to share was my awareness of a term called buy-in. And there was often when I was in my management capacity and I was using managing and leading, early on, I would use phrases like, well, how am I going to get them to buy in? There's that kind of language that kept floating to the surface for me. And it was one day someone said, buy in? Why are you buying in? That's sort of like telling is selling. And it put me back for a second, and we were in a meeting, and tell me a little bit more, because I think I might be missing something here. And they said, well, what would happen if it was sharing is caring? And this was in a charitable organization. We were dealing with a major a virus that was playing in the world at this point in time on the planet. And I was setting up and I was working in an education capacity. That was what the work I was doing. And I went, telling is selling, buy-in. Sharing is caring would be enrollment in or something like that. And all of a sudden, this language that I was using shifted, that instead of me thinking about telling is selling and buy-in, which sort of had that managing feeling to it, all right, I started to go sharing is caring, enroll, which had a little bit of leading, which meant, oh, managing and facilitating groups. And then there was this notion of leading and mentoring. So if I was having a conversation with someone, I would then pay attention to, am I leading this conversation, or am I managing this conversation? Therefore, am I managing it, or am I instructing? What it did is just opened so many more ways for me to take a look at it, that again, it came back to this notion of when you lead, you can be mentoring. When you're mentoring, you can be leading. And therefore, if I'm managing and leading, which of those, in terms of mentoring and maybe something else like facilitating, it just got me going. And it just unpacked. And what it did was it brought a whole nother language, words matter, that started to unfold for me. So I'm using the two sides of a coin metaphor here. And if it's sort of a little, what's going on here? Just go back and listen to it again. Just see the progression that I'm attempting to get to is this sense that the language that you're using and you're linking up leading and mentoring and maybe managing and facilitating, what would that do for your interactions? So with the mentor, right, what language do you want? Do you want to get them to buy into what you're talking about, or would you like to enroll them in what you're talking about? That's where I'm going with it. Anything there, Doug, you want to share before you go into your next story?
No, that was good.
Great, go for it. I think you've got an HR example.
Well, and actually it feeds off of your discussion about sort of the buy-in and the idea of the sharing is caring and all of that. So this is a very current human resource example that I was brought in as a mentor per se, but also as somebody with a bit of an HR background. And they were looking at hiring a new executive for the organization. And number one, there was no succession plan or no succession development or any of that done. But we were having this conversation with the board to be able to go through and talk about what is the approach that we're going to take and all of that. And it would be very easy for me to just say, my recommendation is you do A, B, and C, and this is what it's going to cost. And instead, I saw that there was, of the people that were there, I saw there was lots of business sense, lots of business knowledge. They kind of knew what they wanted, and they kind of knew the path that they needed to go. So my role as a leader and as a mentor was more so to not tell, but to guide them to where they needed to go in order to take care of this or to help facilitate this situation that they had. And by doing so, I was demonstrating leadership to them, and they were picking up on that and starting to take ownership and become accountable for the path that they were about to go on. Because my parting comment at the end of the evening is, and you are accountable to who? And that started to, all of a sudden, the lights came on. I probably should have done that for them earlier in the evening, but it was good for me to be able to see the people demonstrating their leadership skills and attributes at various levels. You know, each person came from a different level of leadership, and you know, basically from a leadership perspective. So it ended up that they still had some more work to do, and they understood that there was accountability, which is part of leadership, which is also ironically part of the whole mentoring journey that we go on.
Great. All right. Well, thank you. So the fourth story actually comes back to myself and being an author. Doug's an author as well, so make sure you check on his books. Your latest book's called, Doug?
You Are Not Alone.
And that's out and about on Amazon. And I certainly encourage you to grab the book. Great book, great stories in that one as well. So from an author point of view, I actually sat down a number of years ago, which is when I went through this notion of, telling, right, or sharing kind of idea. Telling is selling, sharing is caring. And I wrote a book about educating approaches that you use when you manage and lead. And with that, I really dug into more the deeper, richer appreciation of this connection between mentoring and leading. And with that came a really deeper appreciation for the sense of the title of the book, which I've subsequently, because I'm going to be rewriting. The first book had 9 educating approaches. This revised version will have 12. And the reason being is that there are other educating approaches that are coming to the foreground because of what's happening for the world with the planet from the whole. And it's important to bring these out. And so the title of the new book, all right, that reflects what's happening, it's called Help Your Learners Help You Educate with Simplicity, Elegance, and Humility. And it's again, this notion of really bringing to the foreground in interacting with your learner, your mentee, your protege, your apprentice, whatever it might be called, dear mentors, right, is to understand when you mentor, you mentor. And if it involves lead, you lead. But there are these other educating approaches that are like the wings to you. And often I associate coaching and facilitating with me. So often what I will reference myself as is a facilitative mentor rather than an instructive coach. So there's 4, okay? That's how I look at myself. I'm more of a facilitative mentor. So I might be facilitating groups to be able to mentor a person, right? Or if I'm working with a person, I may be drawing ideas to help that mentee out. Versus the instructive coaching. Coaching is to get that person to get that performance, fulfill their accountability, get everything done that needs to get done. And the instruction component is, what is it that you need? What tools and techniques do you need to be able to get it done? And why do you need those tools and techniques? So again, that's where the nuances, again, that come out, that nature of what we're talking about. But that really deep appreciation of what mentor is and its connection to leading. That's what really came to the foreground for me. And why I mention it as a story here is, please, I ask you, dear mentor, do not then go, oh, it's all in the same pot. No. Take some time, take some effort, and you may have to do a little bit of investment, right? Spend a little bit of money to really come to understand the nuances of this, right? And really come to understand is that when you mentor, you mentor. When you lead, you lead. And there is a connection to that, which is what we want to explore next, is that little bit more of a deeper, richer connection that goes with that. So, Doug, I think 4 stories, I think we did pretty good. I think you could take those 4 stories, think them as like fibers. Those fibers become threads. Those threads become strings. Those strings become cords. Those cords become a rope, right? And if you just take each one by themselves as like a fiber to a thread, there's not the strength, but you bring all of those together to form that rope, you can really use that rope to do what you're doing. These are just 4. There's more and more, and that's where the community is so valuable, where you get to interact with others and get more stories, and you get to share your stories because you educate what you love to learn. You mentor what you love to learn. You lead what you love to learn. These are all connected in terms of what's going on. So with that, again, if you have any comments, certainly put them into the chat function. I would love to answer your questions. And again, afterwards, for those who are listening, would be wonderful. But I think, Doug, we said that what we would do is say, okay, mentoring and leading for 2023. What would be some thoughts we would want to share with you? And here we go. And it comes down to this notion of what's the connection between those two terms? What's the competition between those terms? And what's the collaboration between those terms? So we just wanted to offer you, here's another perspective. It's our point of view. This is Doug and I sharing from the International Mentoring Community. It's a point of view that we're offering. All right. Again, please share your points of view as well. We look forward to them. So from a connection point of view, and again, the sort of crib notes are in the show more notes or with the video. So the first two sort of connect under connection. All right. Well, that's using the word connection twice in one sentence. But the idea is, and we've shared a little bit about this already, is that mentoring informs leading as leading informs mentoring from a development point of view. Now, in our definition, it's personal and professional development, learning and growth. That's why it's so important. When you're mentoring, in many ways, it informs that you're leading. And when you're leading, it informs that you're mentoring. And knowing which of those you're doing at the point in time with a sense that maybe they're both together, okay? But when you're mentoring, you're leading. When you're leading, you're mentoring. There might be something there from a development point of view to bring something that is useful to the foreground, something that has utility. That's why we're doing it. And it can be concepts and practices, knowledge and skills, and attitudes, okay? So that a person can be ready, able, and willing to move forward. Your mentee can move forward. But as Doug mentioned in the definition, because it's two-way, it also works for you as well as the mentor. And that's why there's such a strong connection between them. Anything you want to add there, Doug?
Just that if you're not in that place where, you're utilizing mentoring in the right context, then you're going to be really struggling as a leader. So, when you talk about mentoring informs leading from a development perspective, leading informs mentoring. Yes, I agree with that, but I put a lot more emphasis on the mentoring part as the sort of the maple syrup that's going to sweeten the pot for people that want to become leaders, aren't sure how to get there until they actually open the door to mentoring and start to see, well, if I do this and I behave in this context or in this fashion, this or these are some of the potential leadership outcomes that I can expect from that. And I think, I want our listeners to make sure that they, and you already touched on it, it's not black and white. There's kind of some gray there that we just need to be mindful of.
Which leans into the notion of the competition aspect. If we're connecting these two terms, is it possible that there is some competition? So connecting them is bringing them together so they can touch. Competition would sort of have a feeling that they're knocking together. And where this the sense of the knocking together was the sub-element of the original question. How do you connect managing and leading? And then the person said, and this is what they said, while mentoring, am I always leading? And Doug and I had a little bit of a conversation about that. And that sort of says is that when you're mentoring, you're always leading. If you're leading, you're always mentoring. Well, that may not be the case because you might be going, I need to stay in the mentoring. By staying in the mentoring, I am leading. Yes, I get that. But I may not be sharing or bringing forth ideas that make that connection to mentoring. The mentoring really truly about who you are as a mentee, dear mentee. You in being, right, then looking at you doing. So sometimes we may actually say, yes, I'm mentoring. While there is some leading that's there, I may not go into the language that brings forth that leading aspect. Now, let me give you a little bit of an example. Sometimes in our conversations with mentees as a mentor, and let's say it's in the workplace, doesn't matter which kind of workplace or what kind of organization it might be. If the conversation that you're having, if the mentoring conversation is about what's happening along the lines and the boxes of the organizational chart, it's a different conversation than what you're having when you're looking at the white space between the lines and the boxes of the organization chart. And so sometimes those lines and boxes, the mentoring that you may be doing may be mentoring about the managing of those systems versus, okay, how do I lead? How do I learn to lead? So I'm going to have a conversation about you being in the white space of those organization charts. And that's why it's important to come back to our earlier, okay, am I managing or leading? Am I mentoring or facilitating or something else? What is it that I'm doing in the situation and the learning that's unfolding for me? And this takes a little bit of time and an effort to figure some of this out so as that you don't confuse. It comes back to sometimes what happens, dear mentors, is with the confusion, you bring out the ambiguity that gets you into the uncertainty. Where what you're attempting to do is deal sometimes with the confusion to figure out what the risks are to get you to certainty. Now, having said that, you may be sitting there going, what did he just say? And I'm going to encourage you to just go back and listen to it again. Listen for the nuances that are here so that you understand is that when you mentor, you mentor. When you lead, you lead. When you manage, you manage. When you facilitate. Understand what is taking place so that you can get to, I can get the confusions lessons so that I can look at where is it that I can take some risk to get me out of my comfort zone, to get me into this element of certainty, which is what gives me that learning, that growth, that development to take place. And as a mentor, if you can do that and truly understand this leading, what Doug has been sharing in his stories and my stories, you can take care of this, not becoming a competition where one is against the other. You're making a connection and actually leaning into the collaboration, which I'll speak about next. Any thoughts there, Doug?
No, you covered that off.
Okay. So from a collaboration point of view, collaboration is where you, dear mentor and mentee, have a high assertiveness, high cooperation. You are in there. It's two-way. You're both having the opportunity to develop personally and professionally, right? So often with the mentoring, all right, and leaders using mentoring, there might be this sense of better for self or another or together, all right? You might use a word like better. So if you're a leader who's mentoring, it's to get things to be better. If you're mentoring to do some leading, there might be some sense of better. I'm not using more, all right? More sometimes can go with the managing world, okay? Get more of something. But this notion of better, we've covered off in some other videos that we've shared with you. So leaders mentoring and mentors leading, the collaboration is for reasons of better. But better of what? That becomes really important here. And what it does is it gets you into the notion of the word safety of news. If you are looking at the safety so that people can enjoy what they do and do what they enjoy, right? Whether it's in a workplace or life as it unfolds for them, right? To know the way in which to manage the lines and boxes, to be able to lead in the white space, whatever ways you want to look at this, to be able to do it from a safety perspective, then the notion of connecting leading and managing, leading and mentoring and leading is so important. So connect those two, mentoring and leading with noise and news that we mentioned earlier, find the collaboration, how they come together. That's really great. So let me give you a metaphor. The notion of connection is to understand, oh, okay, there's a connection here. But the competition is sort of like looking at these words as though they're like two rocks. One rock plus one rock equals two rocks, okay? The collaboration is look at them from a water perspective. One water plus one water equals one water when you bring them together. And when you look at it sort of through that lens, you're looking for what are the ways to have the collaborative conversation? How do we bring these together? And if you listen to the video again, watch all the other videos that we've put up on the different channels, whether it's through Facebook or through YouTube, we come at all of this from different angles, looking at ways to find that collaboration to take place. So I wanted to bring it through that metaphor. I'm hoping, does that help out, do you think, Doug?
Yeah, it definitely helps out.
Okay. Is there anything you want to add to this before we start looking at, we're at that time to start looking to move out? Anything you want to share before we do the movement?
Just on the collaboration piece, I encourage mentors to ask themselves, who are you mentoring for?
Great question. You want to share a little more on that?
So when I ask the question, who are you mentoring for? Are you mentoring for the mentor, for the mentee that you're working with? Is it, excuse me, is it the organization that you're mentoring? Is it stakeholders or customers or clients that the organization provides services to, which can be enhanced through the mentoring process? Who is it that you're mentoring for?
So sort of like dropping a stone into the lake. There is the stone goes to the bottom to do what you want to do, but there is that ripple effect, right? That influencing. I think that's another way to look at what you're sharing. Is that helpful?
Yep, that's helpful. Yeah.
Okay. Well, like any other time, we're getting close to closing off this broadcast. Again, just want to share with you, add your comments, questions. Hey, if you got a funny you want to share on the topic, you can put it in the comments section. There is the contact page on the internationalmentoringcommunity.com /contact. You can get a hold of us at that place as well. This broadcast, again, if this is your first time, just to remind you, it happens on Wednesday at 10 a.m. Mountain. Come on in. Well, we still got a couple more. We'll probably take a little bit of break over the holiday season that's coming up. You never know. We might actually broadcast. We'll see how things go, but we'll certainly let you know as it unfolds in the next couple of weeks. So again, let's see you on Wednesday and at 10 a.m. Mountain. That would be super. As I bring us in, our tradition is Doug gets to share a final thought to take us out. When I know he has completed that thought, then I will say take care and I will end the broadcast. So Doug, it's over to you.
So a very simple one today is when you look back at this video, I want you to ask yourself, am I a mentor or a leader, or am I a combination of both?
And with that,